This is for the firstborn daughters, the people pleasers, and any girl that was ever labeled sensitive or defensive, any of them. This is for the girls. But not just that, it's actually bad if everybody likes you, because then that means you're doing nothing for you. Every human is made differently. And so for the people pleasing girls, that's one thing that if I could, say to anybody would be the fact that you're never going to be liked by everyone because everyone is different. It takes a lot more strength to be sensitive to people's emotions and sensitive to your emotions and not crumble than it does to be jaded.
For the Girls is a show created to share the stories and experiences of every girl, every story, and every season. With your host, Tobi Naomi, we explore a variety of topics with our different guests. Through deep conversations, some laughs, and solving your dilemmas, every episode aims to leave you feeling seen, heard, and a little wiser. Let's jump into the show.
Hey girl, and welcome to the show specifically made for the girls with your host, Tobi Naomi. Now, if you see me on your For You page, your Instagram feed, even your YouTube shorts, welcome bestie. It's good to see you again. Now, if you haven't, consider me your internet big sister, best friend, who thrives on oversharing about her life and all lessons that she's learning along the way. Stick around long enough and we'll become very good friends. Now, I know y'all have heard me talk, give advice, get ready with me, chit chats, all of that, but I can't help but feel like you don't really know me and I don't really know you. And how are you gonna trust me if you don't know me? You know what I mean? We kind of gotta work this out. So I had a brilliant idea, actually, if I might say so myself, to play a game where we could both play it together and get to know each other. You in the comments, me up front. You can't leave me out here because I'm doing this for the girls. You gotta do it with me. The game we will be playing today is, drumroll please, Candid Christian Convos. Now, you guys have probably seen this all over TikTok. I see every other Christian influencer playing this game. Shout out to Mo for sending it to me. Candid Christian Convos is basically conversation prompts for deep discussions, related to the Christian faith. You can play it if you're not Christian, but you may not understand some of it. Let me be real honest with you. So I'm going to pull out 2 cards, maybe 3, depending on how deep they're going. And I'll answer them up here. You answer in the comments and we'll get this conversation rolling. Okay, first one. Let's see. Do you believe God is always on time? Why or why not? Oh, this is good. How honest do we want to be? I think, obviously, the answer is yes, God is always on time, because if you look in the grand scheme of things, the fact that we don't know anything about the next 5 minutes, I couldn't tell you what's going to happen. I hope I'll still be recording this video and I hope you'll still be watching, but the next 5 minutes are not predictable by us. However, God is aware of the next 5 minutes, the last 5 minutes, and the next 5 years, millennia even. So the fact that we don't know a lot about time, Him knowing a lot about time actually means that regardless of how it feels for us, He's always on time because He knows the stuff. However, from the perspective of a human who is bound by time, bound by space, all of that stuff, it doesn't always feel like God is on time. And that can be really frustrating, especially when you're like, I know that, God, you're bigger than time and you live outside and exist outside of time, but I kind of have to pay this bill today and there's no money in my account. What are we going to do about that? So in my personal walk, it's definitely been a struggle blending the 2 perspectives of God knows a lot more than me. Whenever He shows up, that's the time that He was meant to show up. And He's also good. So I know He's never holding out on me, but also sometimes I would like it if He would show up when within the chronological time I live in, I need it. Still blending the 2. That's why we're keeping it candid over here. I feel like that answers it. Next one, I feel like that was a good short one, so we'll do one more. What is one wrong truth about God that you were fed and have had to unlearn / are unlearning? Oh, this is good. I have one. That it's hard to hear from God. Now, growing up in my house, I wasn't fed that at home, but every other place that I went to, I feel like that was a very reinforced truth. That's not true, but reinforced thought that like you had to do a whole bunch of things to hear God clearly. You had to fast, go up to the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights to pray, and then God would speak. But it was always confusing because I was like, well, in the Bible, it says, my sheep hear my voice, and a lot of verses like that, where I'm like, I don't think that the sheep are going up to the mountain for 40 days to hear the voice of their shepherd. So it's not adding up. And it was only until like probably in the last 2-3 years where I became very confident in the truth that it's actually not hard to hear from God. And yes, because we have a lot of other voices speaking at every given time, we've probably been dulled to hearing from him in our spiritual sensitivity and all of that. But I've had to believe that like God actually wants to speak to me even more than I want to hear him. And for that very reason, and also it's in my genes, it's in my DNA, spiritually speaking, I'm not talking about the physical ones, to hear from God. And I think that that's definitely something I'm having to unlearn actively, actually, as of today, as I'm speaking to you. But it's definitely something that was a wrong truth that was preached to me for a long time. We're hopping into our conversation of the day. So as I said in the intro, this video is for the firstborn daughters, but also the people pleasers, any girls that were ever labeled overly sensitive, defensive. This video is basically for girls like me. And we're about to get a little bit vulnerable, so let's get comfortable because there's a lot to talk about. If you know anything about me, you know that I'm always talking about being a firstborn daughter, like always talking about being a firstborn daughter. Some people hate it, and that's okay, middleborns. We see you, you're seen, it's okay. It's okay. But it's a big part of like who I am. However, it's not the only part of who I am. And one thing that has been like big in my mind while I've been sharing videos for the girls on Instagram, TikTok, and now here, has been the fact that we're not just one type of girl. Like none of us, women, humans in general, but specifically women, are very multifaceted beings. And even just in the list of girls that I listed out, just 4 types, we can all relate with at least one, if not more of them. All these different types of girls exist in each of us. So you can be a people pleaser, but also a corporate girly. You can be a lover girl who's sensitive, but also a confident girl. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's not just one facet of each of these types of girls to each of us. And so it was really important for me in this video to not limit it to just one type of girl. Like I'm talking to the sensitive girlies that may also be people pleasers. However, if you, knock if you buck, like at the same time, you could be a firstborn daughter that's also you're a quiet girl, you're a shy girl. And that's the beauty of all of us, is that all these different types of girls exist in each of us simultaneous. A little backstory, because I got a comment the other day asking me to share a bit of like my story of like, oh, like how was it growing up, not raising up, as a firstborn daughter. And I had the best time. Like I share my experiences and articulate, like give language to some of the things that like I experienced, not because they were all bad, but because you need language for different things that you experience in life, and also for the other girls too that may not have language for what they experience. But in my case, I had great siblings who I love and adore, and they also adore me, so that helps. And I had parents that, yes, I had some typical firstborn daughter experiences, like being the scapegoat for everything and then watching the rest of your siblings not have to, have certain punishments or whatever because your parents figured out with you that was probably not the best idea. But at the same time, they were fantastic and made sure that like joy and always having a good time and like having fun was a big part of our childhood growing up. Like my memories of my childhood are just filled with a lot of fun. Like in Inside Out 2, when Joy, like what are they called? The core memories were very, was it green or blue? No, blue was sadness, green was joy. A lot of them were filled with green. That's how I feel like my childhood was. So very fun, very great. My parents didn't make me parent my siblings. They handled that. They had that down pat. However, at the same time, like I just gave an example of, there were some things that I was like, oh, I'm noticing that there's a difference between me and, let's say, my younger sister, for example. And I don't think it's because of anything other than the fact that our birth order is different. And so when I speak about being a firstborn, it's not because I think it's the be all end all of the world, but it's something that separates us a little bit, wherein middle kids have their own experience. And if you get in a conversation with a middle child, they'll tell you all about it. And lastborns and, fifthborns, if you make it that far, everybody has their own individual experience, but firstborns experience things differently. We were literally the first kids given to our parents, who at the time were probably children themselves, let's be honest. And so all of that being said, that's a big reason why I share a lot about firstborn experiences. Now in that though, back to my childhood, I remember that at a certain point, I don't know when, obviously, but I remember having a conversation with my dad where he was like, you need to understand that people aren't always going to be happy with you, and that's okay. Like, people aren't always going to like you. They may not always love you even, and that's fine. And I think he probably brought that up because he started noticing that I had very big people-pleasing tendencies. And I was probably like 6, 7 at this point, but I would do anything and everything to make sure that people in any given room that I was in liked me. And don't know where it came from. Haven't gone that deep in therapy to figure that out yet, so stay tuned to find out. But I just know that people-pleasing was a very big part of like my life growing up, and that's, I think it shaped a big part of who I am. And there's a couple things that I wish people told me back then, and I know my dad tried talking to a 6-year-old about feelings and people pleasing, and watch how that goes. Obviously there were some things that like couldn't get through to me at that time, but now one thing that I wish I knew then, if I could have comprehended it, is that people aren't always going to like you, like my dad said, but not just that, it's actually bad if everybody likes you, because then that means you're doing nothing for you. For example, I don't like everyone. And that's no shade to them. That's no shade to, the people that I don't particularly like. We just don't happen to gel, because guess what? Every human is made differently. And so for the people-pleasing girls, that's one thing that if I could, say to anybody, would be the fact that like you're never going to be liked by everyone, because everyone is different. So the moment you're actually liked by everyone, first of all, you have no personality. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're actually a shapeshifter, because in order for 100 people, 100 unique people to like the same thing, that thing has to be able to bend to the individuality of each person. But simultaneously, if you're liked by 100 people in a given room or whatever, that means you had to bend to fit the likes and the little quirks and the little things that each person notices in order, to please them all. And at that point, you cease to be you. It's not even possible. And I think that was something that, obviously 6-year-old me, 7-year-old me, whatever, was hard to understand for her. But the older I grew, it's something that I wish I knew before I, did all the things of bending over backwards just for someone else. However, now, I wish, we're not allowed to say that word on here. I wish someone would try, because there's a lot more that I've learned. So that's one thing that I would say to people pleasers, if I could, that you actually can't be liked by everyone, and that's a good thing, because people are all different. But anyways, going deeper into the story, my story, which is actually a lot of our stories, as I'm realizing from sharing on the internet, but at some point, I also noticed that I was a very sensitive girl. And And I thought that was a bad thing. For the longest time, I thought that was such a bad thing. I remember at 10, I wrote like a long letter to my parents, and I was so frustrated writing that letter, not at them, at myself, because I felt like I had a lot of feelings that I didn't always have language for. And that came up later in my life. And, you know, once I got the language, I started being labeled defensive, but we'll get into that in a second. But the sensitive part of me, like I was the kid that would be in a room and would notice, oh my gosh, that auntie is really sad. And I didn't always know how to say it, or like I couldn't always put my finger on it, because, you know, when you're young, you don't know things as well as you may feel them. But it was a very big, what's the word I'm looking for? It was a very big like character trait, I guess you could say, that I had. And sometimes the feelings felt like too big for me to hold. But at the same time that I was trying to like figure out how to carry those feelings, I felt like I was also being penalized for it. And I remember seeing a comment on a video that I made about your sensitivity is not a weakness, sorry. And somebody was like, I wish people in my life knew this. And I never got to reply to the comment, but if you're watching this, it's actually okay if they didn't know that, and if they don't know that, because I don't even think everybody in my life, as amazing as they are, is aware of that. But that was a realization that I had to come to for myself, because numerous times I felt like my sensitivity got me in trouble, and not necessarily trouble of like punishment, but, you know, little things like, you this girl, like, it's not that serious, or why are you crying again? I'll give you a reason to cry. If you're Nigerian, you've definitely heard that one, because the littlest things would make me cry, or the littlest things would make me upset, or just, you know, evoke a certain type of feeling, insert emotion here. And I guess that maybe I was subconsciously waiting, kind of like the person in my comments said, for everyone in my life to get on the bandwagon that like, this isn't a bad thing, this isn't a weakness, this isn't a negative trait to have. But growing up and coming into more of my person, a shout out to God, shout out to therapy too, and like life experiences and being loved through that sensitivity, I realized for myself that it's not a bad thing. First of all, it takes a great level of strength. Let me tell you something. It takes a certain type of human being to be able to have such a level of empathy that you walk into a space and you can feel the feelings of other people and you don't crumble. Like that in itself is a feat. It may not be seen that way by everybody, and you know, not everyone may have that perspective on it, but it doesn't change the fact that it's a lot. And so back to what I was saying, I had to come to that realization on my own, or for myself, maybe not on my own, because I definitely had some help, but for myself, without waiting on other people to realize that. And I guess in the same theme as like what I said to my people-pleasing younger self, if I could go back to tell her something, or one thing I wish that she was told, the part of me that like thought being sensitive was a weakness or a bad thing, it would just be that it takes a lot more strength to be sensitive to people's emotions and sensitive to your emotions, and not crumble, than it does to be jaded. It's actually a lot easier to be jaded by experiences in life that make you not want to feel stuff as deeply so that you don't get hurt, as opposed to allowing yourself to feel it and acknowledge that like, hey, this is how it feels. It may not feel nice right now, or it may feel great. Because sometimes it's also sensitivity to joy, where you're like, oh my God, I'm overstimulated, whichever side you fall on. But it's a lot easier to be jaded than it is to give into those emotions and lean into those feelings. And yeah, I'm just gonna reiterate that your sensitivity is not a weakness. Like, girl, let's not go too deep. Come back for season 2 and we'll have probably a number of guests, one that I could think of right now, that like her whole brand is being known as like somebody that embraces her feelings and publicly. And yeah, you'll come to learn that your sensitivity is actually one of the greatest strengths that you could have. But from there, in my story, I'm trying to keep going back to that story. from the age of 10 or whatever, wherever I was at when I realized, oh, you be feeling stuff. Like you really be feeling stuff. I went into, I think, high school, and you'll see how this story connects. The part that we're about to get into is for the defensive girl, but you'll see how this story connects into there. So I went into high school, I wanted to be a lawyer. This was because I had watched too much Scandal. For the girls that are currently watching Scandal, Suits, How to Get Away with Murder, you don't really want to be a lawyer. You just like Olivia Pope. You just like, what's that babe's name? The one in How to Get Away with Murder. It's okay to like the show and to not say you want to be a lawyer, but I didn't know that back then. So I told myself, and I was also good at speaking and I could defend myself. People say it's defensiveness. I say it's knowing how to argue or how to win an argument. But anyways, that's a joke to the side though. I went into high school and I took legal studies. It was an option that was available because my whole mind was I'm going into university to become a lawyer. Now, legal studies was one of the options available. The other one that was like very new to the school was psychology. And I don't actually remember how I got into that class, but I just know that like it was something that interested me and I was like, you know what, sure, we're gonna take this up. But one thing that I do know, even though I didn't know everything about what the class entailed, I was always very into like understanding my feelings. I already told you the part about being overly sensitive, or let's actually stop using that word. The part about being sensitive to my emotions, there's no such thing as being overly sensitive, but so I knew that like that was something that I wanted to understand more of and become more well-versed in. And so I took the class. Little did I know that it was going to open me up to a whole world. And fast forward to university, got in for political science to lead into law school, hated it completely. And sidebar for the indecisive girls, it's okay to change your mind about your career. Actually, this isn't even just for the indecisive girls. For any of the girls, it is okay to not know what you want to do with your life at 17, 18. That's actually unrealistic, and it's most likely going to change. If it doesn't, props to you. You better than us. But if it does, it's also extremely okay, because at 17, 18, I was 17 at the time. Actually, I was 16 when I was applying to university. There was so much, oh my days, so much that I did not know about life in order to like be well equipped or to have all the tools that I needed to make that decision. But nonetheless, that's just a sidebar. It's okay to change your mind. And that's exactly what I did. I changed my mind. I went so from political science, I switched to psychology. Now, the reason why this story is important in my development into the phase of life where I wouldn't say I was labeled, because I'll be honest, it's not like everybody was saying it to me, but the word "you're defensive," or like the term defensiveness, came up a lot. The reason why this part of the story is so linked to it is because I told you how when I was younger, I always felt like I was trying to find language, like to give language and expression to the feelings that I was having. And when I was trying to write a letter to my parents and, I was feeling frustrated at the fact that I couldn't figure out what I was trying to, communicate to them. And now fast forward to university, I was in psychology, and like throughout high school, high school doesn't really go too deep into all these things, but university submerged me and gave me so many words to describe. I could describe one feeling to you with 500 different words, and we'd still be on feeling number one. You know what I mean? Like it was serious, and it was a blessing, and I wouldn't say a curse, maybe a curse to the people that were feeling frustrated at me being defensive. And sidebar, once again, you'll get used to my sidebars. It's possible to be defensive. Let's just lay that out here. Defensiveness is not a good thing. However, being able to defend yourself is. And I think that that's definitely something that people get mixed up often, because not a lot of people have language for their experiences. And that was something that I came to realize quite quickly, that there's a lot of us that are walking around with feelings that we can't quite articulate. And that's why when somebody says something that deeply resonates with you, you often hear, oh my gosh, you said exactly what I felt. Like that's something, and funny enough, that's something that I hear under my videos a lot of times, and it makes me so happy, and it's a very gratifying feeling because I know how it felt to not have language for things I was experiencing and how much better it feels being able to put words to it. So hearing that I'm giving language to someone that may have had a similar experience but not known how to say it, top 10 feelings in the world, hands down, easily. But yeah, so a lot of people are walking around not necessarily knowing why they feel what they feel or even what they're feeling at the time. And because of that, it can be a little frustrating. Some might say triggering when you encounter somebody that can give language to everything they're feeling. For the most part, obviously never perfect, but is more proficient in giving language to what they're feeling and what they're thinking and what they're experiencing internally. It can be a little bit triggering because you're sitting here, and I understand it because I've also encountered people that can give language to their feelings more than me. And I'm like, oh, this isn't a nice feeling because you're here trying to put words to your, your thoughts, your feelings, whatever. And they're able to explain theirs times 5 before you even get to the first part of yours. And noticing that was very helpful because I would be hearing, oh, you're being defensive. And I'm sitting down there like, all I did was explain what I'm feeling. You know what I mean? Like, we haven't even gone halfway to this conversation. I'm already hearing that word being pulled out. And it took me some time to come to terms with it. Sometimes I was being defensive, and I had to learn that you can't come into a conversation. Let me say this the right way. The difference between defending yourself and being defensive is a very fine, very, very thin line. And it just borders on the point that defending yourself has to do with I'm communicating to you, to the person, what I'm feeling on the inside, what I'm trying to say, what I'm thinking. Defensiveness is I'm trying to prove, it's usually used when you're wrong. I'm trying to prove why in this situation I'm not as wrong. Pause. Okay. Where was I? I'm gonna find it. The difference between being defensive and defending yourself and being defensive is a very fine, very thin line, but it borders on being defending yourself has to do with, or being able to come to your own defense, that's a better way of saying it, has to do with communicating what it is that you're feeling as a person that, is an entity different from the person you're talking to, and you're trying to say, these are my points, these are my thoughts. Being defensive is usually when a person is wrong and they're trying to defend that wrong action against the points that the person, their opponent is bringing up against them, and trying to justify what is not right. That's how I understand being defensive. And so there were times where I had to realize and learn and take in the feedback that in this moment you were wrong, and there's no justifying that. That's separate, and it can be hard to take that in, but it's really important to, first of all, know the difference and stop that part of it. However, also realize that it's important to also be able to stand up for you and explain your point of view and communicate your feelings. And I wish that there were a lot more people that had language for what they were experiencing, so that way we're able to, talk together. You say your side, I say my side. Ain't nobody here accusing anybody of being defensive. We're just actually having a conversation. But because there aren't, a lot of times people are going to defer to, this is a defensive moment. However, one thing that I did come to learn, and if I could speak to any girl that's ever being labeled defensive, this is what I would say. The fact that you can give language to your feelings is a great thing. It's a pro. However, you're also going to have to learn how to use it. Let me reword that. In order to be a little bit more palatable when it comes to standing up for you and explaining your POV on things, it actually helps if you're able to also offer language to the person you're having a conversation with, or you're in a disagreement or whatever with, because that way it stops being just about you and just about how you're feeling and, you know, explaining your side of things. And it actually becomes, oh, she has language for her stuff and, you know, for what she's experiencing, but she's also able to offer up language to me. Nobody in a situation like that is ever going to label you defensive, because immediately it goes from a thing about you into, okay, we're both trying to talk this out. If I can find the words, you offered it to me. If you can find the words, I offered it to you. And that way we can all stand up and explain, not even explain, that's not even the word I'm looking for. We can actually fulfill the point of a conversation, which is getting to know each person's inner thoughts and desires, whatever expectations, depending on the conversation you're having, as opposed to each person just trying to get a word in over each other, because that's not actually a conversation, that is an argument. There's a difference. You know what I mean? So that's just one thing that, like, it was not easy. It wasn't always easy to learn that, or it wasn't always easy to receive that, but I had to grow in that area of, yeah, just that whole defensive label, because it's definitely not a good feeling being called that. However, there's a balance to it. You know what I mean? There's a way to do both. No, not do both. There's just a balance to it. Let's stick with that. We'll go with that. And so that being said, we've said a lot of things, honestly. I don't know what that is. I've talked about the firstborns, I've talked about the people pleasers, the sensitive girls, the defensive girls, but all around, I think just the fact that, like, each of us can relate to at least one thing in this. Let me rephrase that. Pause. I have 2 more minutes for this entire video. How am I gonna fit this dilemma in here too? Okay, I know how I'm gonna end off. With all of that being said, and I don't know what the that is, because that was a lot of things that were said, but yeah, I hope you've been able to, like, one of those girls resonates with you, or even one of those points. And if you're not the sensitive girl and you're not the defensive girl, but you're a firstborn daughter that can relate to the experience of growing up with joy, but also growing up in a space where you were like, there's a difference between me and my siblings, and I'm held to a higher responsibility than they are. Yeah, you're not alone, and it's not just you, and there's a lot of us, and there's me, and I'm going to be sharing a lot more on that, and a lot more, like, you know, in that area of things, but you're not alone. And I hope this video makes you feel a little bit less alone and a little bit more seen, because you are. Now, I went through my comments and I went through my DMs, and y'all be sending me a lot. Thank you. Like, I really love engaging with you guys, but I didn't realize that there were a number of questions that I never got to answer. And so I thought, what better way to end off our YouTube videos than with dilemmas? And when I have guests on the show, as you saw from the introduction, they'll help answer it and we'll tackle a couple. But in this video, I'll just tackle one that really stood out to me. And then you guys can weigh in on what you think the person should do based on the dilemma and based on your advice. So this girl says, hey, Tobi Naomi, you don't need to call me both names. Hey, girl. You can just say, hey, Tobi, but I appreciate it. I always laugh when people call me the names together, because I'm like, they don't go together at all. But I saw your video about engagements and how they are sometimes the enemy's playground. I made a video earlier, very, very early this year, about how when you're engaged, just kind of prepare for the enemy to kind of come and tussle a little bit, because he doesn't like anything that fulfills the will of God, and the covenant of marriage is a big part of the will of God. But anyways, she continues on and says, and I wanted to know, how can you tell the difference between the enemy and just a plain bad situation? Is the devil in cheating? That's how she ended it off. Is the devil in cheating too. Thank you in advance. Well, hey girl. Thank you, first of all, for sending this question in. That's a loaded one, especially the last part. You know, I was reading it, and even like when I first saw it and I was typing it for the show cards, I was like, oh my God, how am I going to answer this? However, I'll start with the first part. So yes, engagements are very beautiful. First of all, you are one step closer to your forever with, hopefully, the love of your life and somebody that you adore and want to be with all the time. So it's beautiful. However, in the video that I shared, I was just talking about how, because it's walking towards the covenant of marriage, sometimes even when you're not a Christian, just because you're still doing that, you're honoring that principle that was made by God, the enemy, he comes full force. He opposes everything that has to do with God. And yeah, so there's that. But I just wanted to make sure that we all know that engagements can be extremely beautiful. They're not a bad thing. It's just something that, like the devil be doing, he likes to come and ruffle up a little bit. Now, all of that being said, a bad situation is very different from the enemy coming into a situation and trying to make it bad. There's a better way to say that. So there's always the temptation to do wrong as humans, especially when you're, and I'm guessing she's a Christian because she used the word the enemy. You don't be calling the devil the enemy, except you know a couple things. So I'm gonna talk to you like you know Jesus and you know a little bit about this. We're all tempted, like we all face temptation. The Bible talks about it. You've probably lived it out. No, you've definitely lived it out. So everybody in any phase of life is going to face some type of temptation. Now, when you're engaged, the temptations come in different ways to different people. Sometimes it can just be that like you're tempted to just be a little bit more petty and rude to your partner because like you're a lot more touchy and little things that should not matter are just becoming really big and magnified and they lead to big blowouts. Or I guess in this case, you're tempted with I'm gonna get to that part of the cheating, but you're tempted with stepping out of the relationship or whatever it may be. That's a temptation. That's the enemy trying to mess things up. And the goal is to stand against every dart, every attempt of the enemy, as the Bible says. But on the other side, a bad situation usually is one that you've kind of already fallen into the temptation. And that's not to say that like, oh, once you fall, like it's one and done, and you can never make it back, because it's possible to mess up and ask for forgiveness and ask for redemption. But it's also possible to have a situation that is not, it's not bad just because the enemy is trying to do stuff to it. It's actually bad because it's not destined for you, or it's just not the right place to be in at the time, or whatever that may be. Now, knowing the difference, that's a very, very context specific situation. But going off of the second part of your question where you said, is it the devil if he's cheating too? When you get to that point, from my knowledge and leaning on the Holy Spirit to help me, I think that, everything is forgivable. Jesus forgives us all our sins. So we also actually are expected and demanded to give that out to people. So that's up to your personal conviction, what you want to do after the forgiveness. But forgiveness that's just the foundational piece of it. However, when you get into things like stepping outside of a relationship and cheating, or just really serious offenses that take a lot more than an apology to get back from, I feel like that's where you now get into like, you kind of have to make this decision for you. So I can't tell you, oh, I think you should get back with him because that was just the enemy. Obviously, it's the enemy that tempts people to cheat. Like that's obvious, but we're all tempted and we don't all fall. So it's possible to withstand those temptations. But once you have fallen, there's consequences that come with that. And that's not to be blamed on the enemy. You know what I mean? Like at that point, we can't be saying, oh, but it's the devil that made me do it. We're not dumb. We all know that there's ways to step outside of falling for temptation. And so at that point that like something like this has happened, it's possible to forgive, it's possible to move on, but that's not something that I can tell you, oh, you should just move on from that because it was the devil, because you're going to have to live with that decision forever, or however long the marriage lasts. You know what I mean? Like, you're going to have to you're the one that's going to have to deal with the repercussions of that action. And so I think my advice would be, if you could find like a trusted person that gives solid advice that's close to you, because I don't know you. There was nothing on your profile for me to even like follow up on or anything like that. I can't give context specific advice, but I can say that yes, the enemy really tries, but at a certain point, it becomes our decision if we're going to take the bait and fall for it. And once we do, those consequences are things that we have to live with. And forgiveness is available. God restores and redeems, but that's a personal decision of what you want that restoration to look like. So do you want to continue on and get married? That's up to you, and that's totally fine. Or do you want to, take a break and say, I don't think this is for me? Once again, totally up to you. And I just think that this one is the cheating part is too specific to just get like a general answer. But at the end of the day, God forgives and God restores, and we forgive too, but we just have to be careful about decisions that require forever. You know what I mean? Because this isn't just a friendship, this is a marriage. So that's what I would say. But thank you for sending in that question. I hope that it helped a little bit. I know I couldn't give like a direct answer, but I just don't want to tell you what to do and then it leads you astray, because that's your life we're talking about here. It's not a joke. With all of that being said, we have come to the end of the first episode of the For the Girls show. Thank you for hanging out with me. You guys are the best. And I know that you played the game along with me in the comments, didn't you? I know you did, but thank you for hanging out with me. I hope that something I said resonated with you and made you feel a little bit more seen, a little bit more heard, gave you language for your feelings. Leave a comment down below. Tell me where you're watching from right now. And if you enjoyed playing that game with me. And actually, no, I have a better one. Tell me what type of girl resonated with you the most from this video. Over the next few weeks, I'm going to have 7, a lot of wonderful guests that are going to talk about different types of girls that you may resonate with a little bit more. So stick around to find out. Share this video with someone you think will need it or could use it in the future, right now, in their past. Like the video, subscribe for more, all the things that you'd be doing on YouTube. And I can't wait to see you in the next episode. Bye.